Hi, James. Hi, how's it going? Okay, I'm gonna make you the host.
Hey, Brenda, how's it going?
Good, how are you? Okay, I made you the host. And I'm gonna allow you to share your screen. Stop sharing mine. Oh, you can share your screen now. All right, thanks. Thanks, James.
Hey, everybody, it's good to be back here with you again today. This is James Doherty with Dover Pole and Partners. And today I'm working more on the Neptune Beach Plaza site, looking at a few different scenarios. So we started working on these based on the input that we got from the public hands-on session. And so I'm going through the process of visualizing a couple different possibilities for the site. All of them are looking at extending Lemon across 3rd Street and into the site in a more walkable, bikeable format to help connect the Kmart site in its future configuration more closely with the town center and the beach and so forth. This one that I'm working on right now that's on the screen is a version of this site in a configuration that would be kind of a classic lifestyle center. So in this version, this is showing keeping the portion of the existing boxes on the site that where the Kmart was, and having that be inhabited with a future tenant that would serve as an anchor use. And then with a town center format, it's basically a retail-led kind of a mix of uses where it's essentially adding walkable retail to what would have formerly been primarily drive-to retail. So the original Kmart box is something, a destination anchor that would largely be a drive-to destination. So the idea is to take and combine with that some walkable fabric and stitch it together so that it's basically seamless from a walkable perspective. And so what I've got here is a little bit of walkable fabric coming out to Atlantic, creating what would be a front entrance for the box where the Kmart was. And now what I'm doing is slowly adding 1- and 2-story fabric. So it could be office, commercial, and then possibly in some cases a little bit of upstairs use. It could be a little bit of office above, for example, or other kinds of commercial that need the ground floor shop fronts. Then extending and connecting this fabric that I've started from Atlantic back to this square in front of the box. So we're going to create a good front door address to the box. And then what I'm going to show here is a little bit of that fabric coming out and turning the corner to getting some additional shop fronts with really good visibility across this narrow public space from Atlantic to take advantage of the visibility from all of the folks driving by. And so what you're getting to see here is a little bit of the work in progress where the details aren't, all the layers aren't turned on. For example, I don't have the trees turned on yet here, for example. So this is actually just the process of actually working on the models to create the visualizations that we're going to be showing tomorrow at the Friday night presentation. I'm listening in on the Zoom meeting stream. So if anyone has any questions, I can hear you there. And I'm also watching the YouTube live stream. So if anybody has any questions they want to chat, type into the chat box on the YouTube live stream. I can see those coming as well. So just let me know if anybody has any questions. I'll continue working here for a little while, and then I'll talk a little bit more in just a bit. So what I'm doing right now, it's a little bit of a painstaking process, but I'm going through and populating the design of the different variations for the Neptune Beach site with buildings at the moment. So what I'm doing is going in and finding buildings that are relatively close to what I'm looking for in terms of character in other models that I have, and then bringing them in, and then the idea is that I can then customize them. So I'm looking for buildings that are essentially kind of a good starting point to reduce the amount of complete designing from scratch where possible. The idea I can always make a custom building if I have to, but it's easier to actually start with a building that's pretty close and then modify it. So I think maybe I'll start to do that in just a second here. So this variation being a lifestyle center, there's an emphasis on providing really convenient um, surface parking for a lot of the uses. So you can see large surface parking fields in the good block locations and easy routes into that parking. A less fine-grained block and street network with the idea that still a lot of folks will be driving to the site, and so kind of a bit of a walkable environment that serves as an amenity for people coming to shop, but still kind of destination retail largely. People being drawn to the site by the anchor in the box, and then their experience is enhanced with the rest of the walkable environment. Yeah, I can see someone looks like they're popping into the Zoom meeting. I see Josh Messenger. Hey, Josh. I can hear, so feel free to ask any questions you might have as I'm working through here. You see what I'm doing right now is working on the Neptune Beach Plaza site. I'll zoom back out here a little bit. I'm working on different variations for the site, different possibilities. So the version that I'm working on right now is envisioning the site as what was termed a lifestyle center. So the idea with the lifestyle center is um, a combination of drive-to retail or largely drive-to retail. So you can see, for example, still maintaining a large box on the site where the current Kmart is and large parking fields associated with that. But then supplementing that drive-to destination with a dose of walkable retail as well. And so oftentimes that's used to extend the retail environment beyond the anchor to provide inline shops that lead to the anchor. And it's similar to the configuration you would find kind of in a classic shopping mall where there are inline shops and then oftentimes with two or sometimes even three or four anchors at opposite ends of the mall. And the idea is that people walk past those inline shops in order to get to the anchors. So the anchors serve as a draw and it generates foot traffic in front of the inline shops. So what the lifestyle centers do is essentially a very similar format, but the center corridor of an enclosed shopping mall has a roof over it. And what the lifestyle centers do is they essentially try to mimic some of the ambiance of a Main Street kind of environment by removing that roof over the central corridor where the inline shops are and treating the architecture in a way that traditional street-oriented buildings would get treated. So creating kind of a grain of walkable urbanism leading to the anchor store. So you get kind of a combination of the ambiance of walkable urban place combined with the kind of the retail logic of anchor helping to draw the traffic past inline shops. And a combination of customers coming for walkability as well as the convenience of being able to arrive back home. So what I'm doing now is slowly taking this model and basically creating it here piece by piece. And so you can see the streets and parking lots and so forth still getting cleaned up here on the ground plane. And then I'm also three-dimensionalizing the place by bringing in different building types, and I'm basically pulling in buildings that are somewhat close to what I'm looking for and then customizing them where needed. You see I had a row of small live, works, or retail here along the back side of the site, along the extension of Lemon across the site. And that was looking a little too monotonous and repetitive to me, and so I'm going through and replacing those with buildings that have a little bit more ambiance to them. It's a little bit of a kind of a steady and slow and methodical process, just bringing in piece by piece, zooming out and looking at how it all looks as an ensemble, and then making corrections from there. In this case, for example, I'm taking the buildings, looking for buildings that are relatively low in terms of the walkable fabric in this configuration. So 1 and 2 story buildings primarily. Since the lifestyle centers focus mainly on the ground floor uses, the retail on the ground floor, and then just supplement with use upstairs, maybe some additional commercial or um, a dose of office, for example, in the upper floors. And then what I'm doing now also is making sure that the paths from parking are really straightforward too. So you can see, for example, this big surface parking lot. I may not detail every single pathway here because the views that we're going to use for the presentation may not show, around every side of every building. So I'm really focusing in on stuff that's going to be visible from the views in the presentation. But you can see here, for example, in plan view, there's a big surface parking field. And if this is the place, one of the spots of ambiance, sense of place that people would like to get to by foot once they arrive, making it easy to park and then, for example, have a pathway that leads between buildings right out into that space to make it really convenient. Same thing here, you can see the buildings out on the side facing toward Atlantic. I've got these spaces in between the buildings, which actually be really kind of nice spaces to walk through. Imagine these being landscaped and so forth. Right now, it's just the bare model, but creating spaces that are comfortably sized, that have activation, for example, with shop fronts turning the corner and lining the sides, leading in that walking path back to the parking. So it's basically a real pleasant experience for somebody if they were to park their car in the back here, and then if this were detailed like a little plaza, for example, to walk through up to the street. And I'll be putting shade trees on the sidewalk here on the street edge, for example. And it's really generating a lot of ambiance here. So as I'm doing this, I'm just really zooming in and out and looking at it from different angles and so forth to try and tune the feel.
Where am I looking?
So I'm focusing on big picture design issues mainly, but as I fine tune the model, I come in and adjust these details. You can see I was just changing roof colors and taking and lining up this arch at the end of the street, which will frame away to the parking beside the box. So the parking is easy to walk to, convenient to get to, but these buildings are lining the edges of the parking lot, and you're going to create a great kind of walkable street space then. So once somebody parked, and I'll be adding the trees along the street as well. Basically a great kind of biking and walking path leading down to that main public space with the box.
Is this just a concept, or is this for like an actual space?
See, I'll turn some trees on here.
Oh, interesting. Where's...
I'll have to adjust some of the trees or locations here inside the box though. Those are for other scenarios.
Ah.
So these trees are, yeah, still inside the buildings here. I'll clean these up as well. But you can see the idea of lining the public spaces with shade trees. Spaces here for pedestrians. And what I'll basically be doing is taking each of these individual views, and then I've got a rendering program that'll add lighting to them. So actually, let's do it. I'll do a test of that right now and share the screen. You can see it'll take just a second to process, but you'll be able to see as well what this will look like with the rendering program, giving more realistic lighting to the scene. Go ahead and save first. There you go. The screen just went dark there. So this is the actual rendering program. So this is going to take a second to process, and then it'll start to show what it looks like with more realistic lighting across the scene that I just modeled.
Cool.
It'll pop in just a second. You'll see it'll start to materialize.
What's the name of the program you're using?
This is for the modeling. I'm using a program called SketchUp.
Okay.
And so just a real common, very user-friendly modeling program. There's a free version and a pro version. I have the pro one, but the free one actually does almost everything the pro one does, so it's a really great program.
Cool.
And then the rendering program is called Thea Render for SketchUp, and it's it basically functions as a plugin. So if you can essentially set it up. You buy the Thea Render, and then when you install it, it shows up right in your SketchUp toolbar. And so I'm basically launching it from within SketchUp. So I've got the model open, and I'll launch it from inside SketchUp, and it'll bring up this rendering window. And it'll basically keep the lighting settings that I had set up in SketchUp. So in terms of geographic location and the time of day and the time of year, I can set all that up in SketchUp. And then when I hit the render button, it's replicating the accurate lighting from those lighting conditions over the model. So it's nice in that it's possible to actually realistically test the effect of light on urbanism, which is great, in terms of giving a feel of what it would actually be like there. So this model that I've got is geo-referenced for its actual location in Neptune Beach. So with the day and time of day and so forth that I've got, this is what essentially what the lighting actually would really look like there at that time. You see, we're basically looking kind of southward in this view, and so that's why those front facades right now are in shade.
Yeah.
Because they're north facing. So you can see it's accurately locating this. And I can actually change it. If I go into SketchUp and I change the time of day, you'll see it'll basically swing the light around, replicating the movement of the sun through the sky.
So what's the big white cube there?
The one in the back?
Yeah. That's
the existing Kmart box. So this version, I'm doing multiple variations for the site. We're looking at different scenarios to be able to compare kind of side by side. So the particular one that I'm working on here is what's called a lifestyle center. So the idea with this particular configuration is it's basically a synthesis of drive-to retail, which the Kmart and its shopping center originally was configured with its big parking lot in the front and so forth.
Yeah.
Primarily as a drive-to configuration, not really walkable, but meant the customers are meant to arrive by car. So what the lifestyle centers do is they look to combine a kind of a kernel of drive-to destination with a walkable place. And so you can see that in this particular configuration, there's still big surface parking fields, but screened from view from the main public spaces with street-oriented buildings, which is something you would find in walkable urbanism. The block structure is not so fine-grained here. You can see actually on this street on the right, for example, I've got parking lots coming right out to the street on both sides of the street. So it's optimized slightly more for driving and not as fine-grained as you would have if you were really optimizing for a walkable place. Also in these lifestyle centers are focused primarily on commercial on the ground floor of the building. So you find typically a mixture of kind of 1- and 2-story buildings for the walkable fabric, where a true mixed-use environment you might have a richer mix of upper floor uses, and so you might have buildings that have 3 stories or more for the upper floors. Although you can still create great walkable fabric with just 1- and 2-story buildings, so you really can create a nice ambiance with this. And it's interesting, the configuration of these lifestyle centers borrows from some of the logic of shopping malls, in that there is still a main anchor on the site. So in this case, just reusing that Kmart box as an anchor. And then the walkable urbanism is essentially functioning a lot like the inline stores that you would have within a shopping mall. Typically a shopping mall has got, there are a couple of classic configurations. Like one is the dumbbell configuration, where there's a interior corridor with a big anchor at both ends, so 2 anchors, one at either end. And then the inline stores are basically between the 2 big anchors. And so the idea is that shoppers are coming to the anchors as destination draws, destination retail, and basically once they park, they go into that interior corridor and walk past the inline stores in order to get to the anchors. And so it is essentially a way of driving foot traffic past those inline stores in a shopping mall. And so the lifestyle centers are basically borrowing from that concept here. So you can see in this configuration, the anchor is basically seamlessly connected with the edge of the walkable environment. And there's a kind of a entranceway here off of Atlantic that gives visibility directly back to that anchor. So I'm afraid it's creating a street that frames a view right to where the front of the anchor would be. And then lining that with walkable urbanism, that would feel really comfortable for a person to be out of their car and strolling, and there could be outdoor dining there, for example, on that street space leading to the front of the box. And in a real high sense of place right at the destination. So I've got a little public green there, for example, in front of the box as well. So when you're in those public spaces, the idea is to get to provide a 360-degree environment for people who are interested in coming for that walkable ambiance. So even though there's a lot of plentiful parking in surface configurations here in this scenario, there's an idea of a possible garage there on the right-hand side, but for the majority of the stores here, the idea is essentially mostly surface parked for this configuration, this particular version. And so the idea is that making the parking really convenient in this situation still, but making it easy to walk right into the walkable urbanism. And once you enter the public spaces, the walkable spaces, there's a complete 360-degree environment that feels really good. And so that's basically what I've been working on achieving here with so you can see where this long green is, for example, fronting onto Atlantic. The three sides of that are lined with the fronts of buildings. So basically I'm screening the views of the parking lots from that public space, so it would feel good. And there's basically that one is creating a kind of a window into the environment for people who may be passing by on Atlantic. So it creates kind of a first indication of that high quality public space right off of Atlantic with that initial green, and then just really easy wayfinding then down that street to the second public green right in front of the box. So it creates kind of a really seamless network of pedestrian spaces, pretty straightforward, and leading right to the front of the box again in this configuration. Cool. So that's the essence of this one. Yeah, and we're looking at a few others. I'm doing another version, for example, that's more optimized toward walkability. That's just more fine-grained, reduced emphasis on retail, and reusing the site for a more broad distribution uses. So less need for, for example, if there is a higher proportion of residential on the site. A lot of residential types, it's possible for a house or a row house, that sort of thing, to park on its own individual lot, and so it doesn't need a surface parking lot, because the parking could just happen, for example, in a back garage behind the main unit. So these big surface parking fields can start to shrink in that more walkable configuration as the diversity of uses increases. So that's what I'll be working on that version. So I'm still kind of cleaning that one. I can give you an indication of it. Let me see. You've seen this one, but maybe pause.
You know what? I would love to. I genuinely, because I love this stuff, and seeing all this and then do it. But I have a hard stop at 11. I have to go hop on a GoTo meeting.
Oh, thanks for joining me, Josh. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, no problem. I'll pop back in later.
Awesome. I'll keep working on all this then. See you soon.
This is cool. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Josh. Oh, I see. I've got a question here from Eric Emberson on YouTube, on the YouTube live stream. The question is the retail building to the west of the Kmart already gone, or is the demolition part of the proposal? I saw a building there in Google Street View. The answer is, yeah, the building is still currently there, and this is one variation of many that we're testing out for the Neptune Beach Plaza site. And in this particular site, yeah, I'm showing the building to the west of, let me rotate this on the screen to north up so everyone can see. Yeah, I'm showing the building. This is the existing Kmart building repurposed in this configuration. And in this version, I am showing the building, the existing buildings that are to the west, replaced with this parking field to the left of the big box in your view. And the idea here with this particular configuration is there wasn't a tenant available for those, and that's the reason why they went vacant, those larger boxes. And so the idea here is to take those very large footprint retail users and replace them with, over time, smaller incremental retail fabric that's creating those walkable destinations in front of what is currently the Kmart box, repurposed Kmart box. And essentially the idea is taking the parking foreground of the Kmart box and occupying it with that kind of grain of walkable urbanism to create ambiance and create a pedestrian and cyclist and funnel to the front door of the box, using that as an anchor. And then essentially taking the unused boxes that were to the west of the main anchor box and shifting the parking to that location. So basically taking building footprint and pushing it in walkable format up in front of the box to create that framed view, and then taking essentially the parking that was in front of the box previously and effectively shifting that to where that older building fabric was to the west of the box. So that's basically what's occurred here in terms of kind of moving uses around on the site. This lifestyle center configuration I mentioned earlier is primarily a retail kind of a configuration. It's essentially not aiming at an extremely rich mix of uses. It's primarily a retail destination kind of a configuration. And so essentially just taking what was drive to retail in the shopping mall with a big parking field in the front and converting it to a hybrid, basically, where there's still some drive to destination aspect of the box as a big anchor, and then combining that with the kernel of walkable urbanism to create ambiance to attract people, as well as the use within the box itself. So again, this is termed a lifestyle center. It's basically a evolution from the enclosed shopping malls, and so it's a type that you see many places around the country, where there's been a need, an existing shopping mall, for example, needs refurbishment. A lot of the tenants may have turned over or vacated, and so they're looking for repurposing an older enclosed shopping mall. And people are craving these kind of outdoor, authentic urban experiences more today. And so that the idea with this particular configuration is combining the kind of the logic of the enclosed shopping mall in terms of having an anchor and inline stores that people walk past in order to get to that anchor, combining that with outdoor kind of Main Street ambiance. So that's this configuration. Eric, if you heard that, let me know if that answered your question. I hope that was helpful for you. So I can turn these layers on and off. I'm basically setting up the model to be able to run these different scenarios. So that's the lifestyle center version. I'll turn the trees off here because the trees I still need to optimize for each of the different scenarios. But I have basically trees. So I can run you through a couple of the ones that we're looking at here. That was the lifestyle center. And then there's a variation that we're looking at that if it were just primarily condominium, so that's very conventional kind of condominium types. I'll turn the trees back on too. It's better with the trees. And so that's really a primarily residentially led version. So the lifestyle center we looked at previously was just reconfigured retail primarily for more optimized for walkability, a combination of drive-to and walkability. And then this is a version that really is pushing the needle way over toward residential. It might have a little dose of retail, or restaurant, or commercial on the ground floors, for example, of buildings, but largely residential. And then, let me turn that one off. So what we're looking at is scenarios that are pushed strongly enough in different directions that we can really compare them side by side and get people's reactions. So that's the condominium or residential emphasis. And then this is a version, I'm in the middle of it still, designing this one, but this is going to be a version that is really optimized for walkability with smaller green blocks and streets and so forth. Let me turn the trees back on here too. So let me drop down a little closer, you can see this. So this is, I still have to add the buildings back here on the main square. I'm still filling in some open gaps. I haven't finished this version yet. But what this is showing is a much more kind of rich and balanced mixture of commercial, walkable commercial, a little bit similar to the lifestyle center, right up on Atlantic where there's a lot of visibility. So a little dose of commercial, and then a much more rich mixture of other uses, in particular increased emphasis on different residential types. So you can see, for example, transitioning from those commercial locations into showing row houses here, for example, around that public space. This is I tried to keep the urbanism and the street block structure quite similar from one scenario to the next, so that they're relatively easy to compare side by side. If I started making the street configuration very different for each one, it starts to get to be difficult to compare them kind of apples to apples. But keeping the streets in just about the same spot, these streets are essentially the same as the lifestyle center. These ones in the foreground and this connection of Lemon through the site. In this version, this is showing the phasing out of those boxes altogether, and so basically extending and transitioning beyond the kind of layer of row houses and so forth to a layer that's primarily single family back here, kind of real walkable, fine-grained single family housing with a really nice kind of an ambiance. Again, the good hardware for walkable places, so front porches, for example, on the houses that make a really nice transition between the public space and the private space. All of the details for streets to make them feel comfortable and walkable as well too. So sidewalks that connect, and planting strips for shade trees. And one of the thoughts here with this is creating a really gentle transition between whatever redevelopment might occur on the existing Kmart site. For example, in the residential neighborhood that's to the south, you can see they're kind of just boxes here, placeholder boxes for those houses, but these are the existing houses to the south of the site, and their backyards face northward across there's a kind of narrow canal that runs through here, and then their backyards face northward toward the back of the Kmart site. And so this is really essentially taking and having like facing like, or like backing up to like across that canal. One of the other possibilities for this configuration, taking and replacing the existing boxes, which are in this location, you kind of see them ghosted in there under the grass. This is where the Kmart box currently sits. So it allows us, if we can connect further into the site, a possibility for really creating great access to this public park that's back in here as well. There's actually a beautiful treed public park back behind that Kmart site. And right now it's a little bit landlocked. It's hard to get there. So the thought with this configuration is to create a really kind of narrow and quaint kind of a walkable street that comes through the back here and then leads back to an entrance into that park. So it would feel really kind of cozy and with a lot of ambiance back there. This is showing a design idea for a little formal element at the center of that park, and then let the rest of it be informal. You see that with a lot of the kind of classic landscape designs of the 1920s, the turn of the century, 1920s. The Olmsted brothers were really famous for doing that, for taking and combining kind of beautiful painterly naturalistic landscaping, and contrasting that with something that might be a formal element, for example, to create a sense of focus at the middle of a park. So you can see if I drop down to the street view, basically what that does is gives a goal to walk to. You can see there's if there's a monument, for example, in the street, or a monument in the park in the middle of that formal area with a reflecting pool, maybe. If you're looking down that street, it's framed in your view and gives a destination to walk to. Put something, an object in the frame of the view down the street. And then once someone arrives at that kind of focal element, then these informal paths kind of wind off into the trees and so forth. And it's a real opportunity to explore beyond that. Hi, Eric. I see your comment. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you like the streets. Yeah, that's one of the constants with all of these. Eric says that he likes the variations in how they frame the public spaces, and that he'd be happy walking in these areas. Yeah, that's the thought. That's one of the constants with all of these is the idea of creating well-framed public spaces. So basic vocabulary of public spaces is shaping them all on the ground. So you can see, for example, the green in the middle, and then activating them with essentially complete streets. So you can see here on this particular public space, a way for a car to go around that, but in a really traffic calmed way, nice narrow travel lanes. And then also create hardware for walking, so the wide sidewalks, for example. And then once the spaces are shaped on the ground, making sure that they're also shaped three-dimensionally. So in this case, using landscaping to reinforce the shaping of the space, and then the fronts of buildings as well. And then it's really kind of a key thing, the idea of getting the right side of the building facing towards the public space. Buildings have front sides and they have back sides, and the front sides are essentially the presentation faces, where you have things like the front door and the front porch or balconies and so forth, presentation face of the building. And a public space will feel really good if it's faced on all sides by presentation faces of buildings. The back sides of buildings, you can see in these cases, these row houses, for example, important. This is where, for example, back entrances and parking access and so forth is. It might be a place where you have things like trash cans for pickup back there also, or you might have electric meters and so forth. So the messier side of the building tends to be the back side. And so by keeping the front and back grammar really clear, so that the front grammar is basically what's facing toward the key public spaces, and the back grammar is basically absorbed in mid-block locations. So you can see here, the block is designed so that fronts are facing out all the way around the block, and then all of that back of house stuff is basically contained in the mid-block location, which helps to screen it from view from those public spaces. And so it's a really kind of a useful technique for making sure that the public spaces in the design are going to feel really good for pedestrians and cyclists and so forth, and people in their cars, for humans. basically what I'm doing right now is I just took these two buildings out on that main space, fronting Atlantic, and I like the way that they looked in the lifestyle center variation. Those two buildings are kind of highlighted in blue right now. And so actually what I just did is copied them from the lifestyle center configuration, and I just dropped those also into the fine-grained walkable urbanism configuration. So let me see, I'll click out of it so you can see it, but I've basically, these are both turned on at the same time. We get rid of the lifestyle center. So now, yeah, you can see in the walkable urbanism configuration, I've got that building in the corner, for example, added in there now. The silhouettes of the roofs make a lot of difference in terms of the character of the place as well. You can see these pitched roofs, the kind of the roofscape. It's difficult to perceive when I'm really up high looking down. That's when the kind of the composition of the block and street structure and so forth is really clear when you're looking down on the plan. But in reality, experiencing the place, people are going to be experiencing it from low down on the sidewalks. And so the lower down you go, you can see the silhouette of the shapes of the roofs really starts to become very prominent, and that becomes a really big part of the character of the place. So it's one of the things I'm looking at here too. I'm thinking about that. And I'm using one of the principles I'm using here a lot is the idea of creating punctuation or focus in key locations. So we can see this entrance off of Atlantic. If I drop down low, you can see the idea of use of focal shapes to mark that key entrance. So this building that's on the corner, I've got these strong gable ends. So anything that's got vertical emphasis like that tends to feel focal, and it'll help to mark the spot as a landmark and really reduce the need to have things like signage telling people that, you know, this is the spot to enter, and just the buildings themselves, sense of place will indicate that that's an important spot and can serve as a landmark for the entrance. And then this building that I have on the right-hand side with the cupola on the roof, for example, again, anything that is relatively vertical in a composition, in an architectural composition, will tend to read as focal, and I will want to go there. So you can see that idea on that key corner using a building with a real strong vertical focal element. And then I'm setting that off actually by contrasting it with this building that's more primarily horizontal right next to it. If I had a lot of vertical elements side by side, it could start to compete, and it'd be difficult to tell, relatively speaking, which is the most important of them. So it's a way of giving extra emphasis actually to the focal element, is to have focal architecture and then set it off by having architecture that's distinctly less focal around it, as a way to create contrast. So you can see I'm starting to bring back additional gables and so forth facing toward that public space, which are kind of minor punctuation points which generate a lot of interest. But that's basically, you can see that's the reason why I used that horizontal building right next to and adjoined with the building with the cupola on the corner. Right now I'm showing that building with the cupola step forward as well too. So if you're in this public space looking down the street, you've got the kind of the nice rhythm of the smaller gables, and the cupola and the gable at the end pop up a little bit higher as more primarily focal. And then that building with the cupola steps forward again a little bit too, to give a little extra emphasis and prominence. This one I'm about to start refining also. Because we have some limited commercial here facing out toward Atlantic, one of the things, when I showed the lifestyle center variation, the middle of these blocks were occupied by large surface parking fields, largely screened from view by buildings along the street edge. In this walkable format, a lot of the residential, as I mentioned before, doesn't really need big surface parking fields because they have the ability to park on lot for each of them. So for example, if you have a, let's pick one of these. Say this house, for example. If you're looking at this house that I've got right now fronting toward the park, fronting southward toward the park. So this house, the main house sits on its lot fronting toward the park, and then on the same lot, if this is a single lot, the back of the house might have a outbuilding that has garage access from the backside. And so essentially the parking is all just occurring there on the lot, maybe supplemented with on-street parking. In my street, the streets that I'm blocking out here, these gray lines indicate on-street parking on both sides of the street. So there's a good amount of parking that's occurring there as well. And so for this kind of fabric, for single family or row house fabric, they can typically park just with the parking spaces on the individual lots in the rear, and then supplemented with the on-street parking in the street for guests and so forth. And people who may be coming to park and come down and stroll across the bridge to the park over here. So there's a really reduced need for those big surface parking fields in this kind of fabric. But what I'm going to be looking at next is where there is commercial fronting toward Atlantic on the north side of the site, going in and doing some surface parking behind those to increase the amount of parking just for the commercial, because the people arriving from off-site would be greater for those uses than they would be for the residential in the south part of the site. So that's what I'm going to start to work on here next. I might grab some parking pieces from over in that lifestyle configuration and pull them over here to block out the parking here. Hey, Sue, how's it going? Hey, Eric, thanks for joining us.
Morning, James. Can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you, Sue. How you doing today?
Good. Yeah, I was looking for the window.
Okay.
The Zoom. How's it going? Oh, it looks nice. Now you have a green space now.
Thanks. Yes, I'll show you the different versions I'm working on. I've got a few different variations. This is the full walkable
James,
version.
but when you before you log off, I mean before you call it a day today, can you share with me this file that you were working on?
Sure. Yep. I'll send it to you. I'll Dropbox it to you.
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can send it to you. I'll send it to you with Dropbox. That sounds good.
I couldn't hear you now. Let me see. I have to reset my setting. I think I set. How do I change my setting? Okay.
Hey, you can hear me now, Sue?
I was setting the audio to a screen that doesn't exist. I connected to a TV, but then I turn off the TV. Now I turn on the TV. So, but now I have to. I shouldn't set it to a TV though. Let me see if I can change the audio to.
Let me show you. I'll show you the main variations that I'm working on here. Do you want to see? Are you able to see your screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a version that's going to be kind of fully walkable. So emphasis on fine grain walkable fabric. This is more TND kind of full range of unit types with a bit of commercial on Atlantic, then transitioning to row houses and other missing middle types, and then transitioning all the way to kind of fine grained single family as it goes back toward the park and the backs of the existing single family to the south. So that's this one. And then I've got another one that's focusing on really tipping the needle strongly in the residential toward condominium uses. So really looking at a lot of contrast from one scenario to the next so we can compare them. So this is a condominium version. So strong emphasis on that. Maybe a dose of retail or restaurant, for example, on ground floors facing toward Atlantic, but much stronger emphasis on condominium. And then the third one here is emphasis on the other direction on retail. And this is lifestyle center, where the box of the Kmart is basically kept and repurposed for an anchor, and then creating inline commercial and retail, forming a walkable front door for that anchor, and then maintaining large surface parking fields for folks driving to the site. So three main initial variations among others that we might be working on, but this is the idea is, again, to keep as much stuff as constant as possible, one variation to the next, so that, for example, the street and block structure is relatively similar one to the next, so that they can be compared fairly apples to apples, but then taking and creating a strong amount of contrast in terms of the configuration of uses on the site so that we can really test going different directions with that. So yeah, working.
This version, so what is this version with parking garage?
Now this one, all three of them might have a parking garage as part of the configuration, you know, especially if we're trying to help with the unlocking development opportunities, for example, even in the town center close to the beach. Of a garage in this location, it's about a 10-minute walk from, this is the far side, you know, the far western side of the, we're looking south here. So the far western side of the Kmart site is where this garage is being shown. And the thought is that if there were a municipal garage locating it not right at the destination, you know, the beach and town center are the destination. If we can pull it back upstream from that and people are parking here, they basically are walking past all of these other uses on their way to their destination. So it's a way of generating foot traffic through and activating other properties, other uses on the way to the town center and the beach and so forth. You know, that's the main destination for the area. And so that's the thought here, is that any of these versions could have a parking garage, one or more parking garages as part of the configuration. So that's something that we can turn on and off for each individual variation.
Oh, that's great.
And beyond that, then taking the rest of the site and showing it really in some strongly contrasting ways to test those different scenarios. So yeah, that's basically what I'm working on.
Awesome.
Do you want me to turn the screen over to you? Do you have a screen you want to share? And I'll let you take over.
Yeah, I can share screen now.
Okay, I'll make you host then. I'll let you take over.
I think you
Thanks everybody who's been joining me.
I think you need to make me a host first, James. Yeah.
Sure. There you go. Okay. Okay, you're the host now, and I'll stop my share. All right. Thanks, Sue.
Okay. Thank you. Can you see my screen now, James?
Yep, I can see your screen.
Oh, okay.
I'll check it on YouTube, make sure it's coming through too. YouTube is a little bit behind the Zoom meeting by a few seconds. There's a little delay as it gets posted over there. So I'll let you know, it should pop in there in just a second. Is this Lumion?
Yeah. So
oh, that's great.
On the library side, that's on the canal trail. So this is a opportunity for a public gathering space next to the library building.
Yeah.
And also I show a bridge here because let me first.
Did you work on the variations for the Penman intersection that were shown at the workshop last night?
No, that was Louisa, I think.
Oh, okay. Do you know what she built those in? Was that Lumion as well?
Maybe. I don't know. The intersection of the.
Yeah, she showed different variations, different versions of.
Oh.
Different configurations for that.
It's like Photoshopped, but it could be Lumion too.
Okay. Yeah, it looked like it was possible to do in Photoshop, but the perspective was really matched well, and so that looked, for that reason, like it was likely, like in the lighting conditions and so forth. I was wondering if it was matched very nicely with the existing photograph.
Yeah, Louisa did a good job.
Yeah. I'll have to ask her then. I'll see how she created that.
Yeah, but Louisa is also very good with Photoshop, so I will
both of them.
be surprised if she just did it with Photoshop.
Yeah, they look great. I thought they look great. I'll go ahead and mute. I'll log off here from this end then, and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah.
This is looking good. It's looking nice what you're working on.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So James, let me, if you can share with me your file, that would be great because I'll probably work on that the next.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Take care. Hey, Sue.
Hey,
Hey, would it be possible for me to share my screen just for one more second? I want to take a picture of something on the
yeah, sure.
on the YouTube stream. Thanks.
I can do that. Stop. How do I stop sharing? Stop share. Okay. Yep.
Okay, let's see.
Are you able to share?
Can you make me host again, I guess, just for a second, or do I need to do that to be able to share? Let's see. Share screen. Oh, yeah, if it's possible to make me host again, just for a second.
Okay. Yep. Yes. Should be able to let me know if it works now.
Okay, I'll see if it pops in. Okay, yeah, I need there. So thanks. I'll make you host again. There you go. You're host again now, Sue. I'll stop my share again from this side. There you go. You can reshare your screen if you like.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Sue. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Welcome. Were you checking something or?
Yeah. I was just checking one last thing. Yeah, but it's all good. All good.
Okay. Did you have any people coming this morning?
I had a few. I had some folks on YouTube. I was doing some live chat with the folks on YouTube. Also, I had someone join from the Zoom, and then I had someone I was talking with on YouTube as well. So yeah, we had some folks join.
So I should check the YouTube channel as well.
I would do that. Yeah, it was useful. I was getting on in the chat box. I was getting folks commenting on the chat box of the YouTube live chat.
Mm.
So I would do if I were you. What I did is just turn the volume off on my phone as I was watching YouTube, so that it wouldn't feedback through the microphone.
Yeah.
So I just silenced my phone, but I was able to watch and see if any comments came in on YouTube that way.
Oh.
I'll go ahead and log out here. Good to talk to you. Talk to
Okay.
you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Take care. Bye.